Father Nikita, thank you very much for joining me today. We've been looking forward to meeting you and speaking with you. Not many people know who you are, but you have a significant history in Jordanville, and my purpose today is to record your memories as you recall them, because I know you possess a lot of information. You have a lot of lived experience and history that we're all interested in. And if you would give us an introduction of who you are, that'd be great.
I'm sorry, what was your...
That'd be great if you could give us. We know who you're very. You have a long history up in Jordanville, and we're curious about who you are. What's your history in Jordanville, and who are you?
I'm Father Nikita Grigoriev, and I moved to Jordanville in order to finish seminary there first. And then after I finished, I was asked to stay by Bishop Loris and teach in the seminary. So I agreed to do that. And I ended up teaching there for 20 years. And I was ordained, and I served as a priest. And I counted on over 30 parishes of the Church abroad. And I needed to go and replace priests who were not able to serve for one reason or another. And they would ask me to go, and I've served in many of our parishes, and I've got to meet a lot of the people and got to know them and all over America and Canada and even Australia and other places, even South America. So I got to see a good cross section. I was born and raised in the Russian Church abroad, and so were my parents. They were also part in the formation in the church abroad, and they knew all the people from their youth. So this is a very near and dear to us, and that is I'm just looking at my name here. I don't know how I ended up being spelled with a R-I-G instead of G-R-I, but I guess that can be an alias then, if that's how it has to be.
I'll correct it in the description in the box.
But anyway, so I ended up teaching at Jordanville, and so I was in a position to see. I was very close to Metropolitan Vitaly. He almost like raised me from when I was like a boy, from like 1960. We met him in Canada, and I always admired him and felt very strongly about him, that he was a kind of an uncompromising pillar of the church, which he was. So he helped to shape a lot of my views and my attitudes, and educated me on the essence of the whole real spirit of the church, uncompromising with the spirit of the world. They're completely incompatible, as it turns out. And yeah, go ahead.
So how long were you at Jordanville? From what years to what years were you a teacher?
Well, we moved with my wife. As soon as we were married, we only lived a year in Toronto after marrying in 1982, maybe a couple of years. And then in 1984, we moved to Jordanville. Wow. Because I had a career in the world before that. I had a science degree in engineering and aeronautical. I was working in that field for a few years, and I was a technical representative. I worked in many parts of the world with aviation programs, and then I became an airline pilot. We started the Emirates Airways program there in 1980. I was one of the first pilots. We were flying just 6 planes back then, and then I got to do something else, and so I quit that job and went back and applied to medical school, which I was accepted in Canada. And then at that time I was kind of like engaged to my future wife, Joanne, and she didn't understand a lot of things about Orthodoxy, so was asking me, and I could not explain them to her. So I just started reading things, and I started reading a lot of Orthodox material that I didn't even know existed. And then at that point, I realized that I'm much more interested in this than in medicine. And so I actually quit the medical ambitions and switched right over to seminary. And they gave me advanced standing here in the middle of the school year, and I finished basically the program like in a year and a half. And at that time, Bishop Lorsden asked me to stay. This was like 1984, and then 1986, 87, I believe I started the teaching at the seminary, and I taught apologetics, which is became a fifth-year course, which describes the faith and the Orthodox faith, and defends it against all false accusations and attempts to undermine it. And so that became kind of my subject, because my science and philosophy background and my engineering background, I had some insights into it that I found very valuable. And so I was teaching, asked to teach logic. Well, that was mainly it. So then during the course of the apologetics program, I started developing a system of teaching it that eventually coalesced into, from the notes, into a book that is now called the Faith and Delusion, Faith and Spiritual Delusion, which then was translated. And every time I filled it out more until it became not only just for the seminarians as a textbook, but for people at large, especially those who are interested in Orthodoxy and the apostolic faith. So that's basically my background. And I was always strongly opposed to any compromises or falseness or deals with the truth in the church, and with the purity of the church that had to be maintained. That we felt it was it was entrusted to us, and we needed to keep it, because there were not many places. So that's why, I wrote a paper called "The Russian Orthodox Church Abroad: The Beacon of Light." It was referred to as the Beacon of Light because it was kind of like a beacon for all the spiritual movements in the world that held the church abroad, Russian Orthodox Church abroad, in high regard, as the uncompromised continuation of the genuine Russian Orthodox Church, which is now abroad in exile. But it was the one that did not compromise with the world in any way or the godless authorities, and it kept the faith. So I felt it was incumbent on us to absolutely, to defend that and hold on to that. So I was holding that line, and eventually, in Jordanville, it started not to mesh very well with the changing times and the spirit in Jordanville after that.
So you ran in the circles. You ran, and you were close with Metropolitan Vitali. You knew Metropolitan Lauris. Presumably you met Saint Philaret. I mean, you got there right around the time. Briefly.
I even got to serve with him. He was a great defender of Orthodoxy too. And
we have him here with us.
Yes. He was a great defender of Orthodoxy and a very spiritual, very holy man. Yeah. His incorrupt relics are now in Jordanville here, in the reliquary right under the altar where he used to when he served sometimes. I remember him giving sermons in Jordanville. He was actually even tortured in China for his faith, and God helped him through that. It was some miraculous stories he told.
So most of us who have read ROCOR history, we know that ROCOR had a certain attitude towards the Moscow Patriarchate. Can you give us, and it wasn't a positive one for obvious and good reasons, can you give us a history of what ROCOR believed about Moscow and their apostolic succession, the locum tenens issue with Sergius? Can you give us an idea of what old ROCOR then believed before the Union?
Oh, sure. The Russian Orthodox Church abroad or outside of Russia, which is it's the same meaning, it's the same church. We basically came into existence after the end of the Civil War in Russia, when the bishops ended up with a large number of their flock and a large part of the White Army that was fighting the Bolsheviks ended up being displaced from Russia, and Serbia offered them refuge. As you know, in 1920, the Serbian government and patriarch basically welcomed the Russian immigrants when the Civil War was lost to the Bolshevik armies. And so in Serbia, they established the Russian Orthodox Church abroad. And then back in 2020, we just went there all again to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of that, and went to the very same places where the bishops were housed, and the Russian emigres were founded. And so anyway, the attitude towards what was going on in the Soviet Russia at that time was that, well, the Soviet government has taken over. This was 1920, and they are putting great pressure on the church to basically to subjugate it under their will, because their ultimate goal was a stated goal to destroy the church. So there would be no church left, and there would be even no faith in God left. Their stated purpose was to actually obliterate faith in God completely, and especially the Orthodox Church. So the church abroad realized, led by Metropolitan Anthony Krapovitsky, we felt that there was great pressure on the church in Russia, so we could not, did not, take on ourselves to judge them in any way. But nonetheless, and after the repose of Patriarch Tikhon, who was our last legitimate patriarch in Russia, his locum tenens was Patriarch Kirill of I'm having a bit of trouble in English.
Peter Krisa.
Kirill Kazansky, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Of Kazan. He was the number one, kind of like patriarch, and then and then just below him on the same rank, but number two, was Peter of Krutitsk. So those two metropolitans were then kind of like replacements for Patriarch Tikhon, who had just reposed. And then each one of those had kind of like assistants also to them, who were below them, that they appointed. And there were like 9 of them. Those were like the sub patriarchs, like in third place, but they were under the authority of Kirill of Kazan and of Peter of Krutitsk. And one of those 9 was Metropolitan Sergius. So basically, he had no right to take authority over the whole church, but he used the excuse that both Metropolitan Kirill of Kazan and Peter of Krutitsk were under arrest at the time and in prison. And so he took it upon himself, one of those 9
assistants,
to basically to set a new direction for the church, to take over the leadership of the church. And he basically made a deal with the Soviet government that was under the auspices of Tovarish or Comrade Tuchkov, whose job was to, his assignment was to create a schism in the Russian church to help break it down, because the Soviets realized after 10 years of persecution of the church that they were not succeeding in eradicating the church. It was still there. People were still in jail. They were being executed. But the more they tried to persecute the church, the stronger the church kind of like became in spirit, and the more resistant it became, just like in Roman times. And so they decided on a different approach, and they assigned this Comrade Tuchkov was his name, to try to split the church so that they could deal more easily. That was always their way, to split and then to divide and conquer. That's always their approach, and even to this day, that's how they work. They always try to instigate. They manage both sides, manage conflicts from both sides, and so they tried to split the church. So this Tuchkov came together with Metropolitan Sergius, who, like I said, years before that already tried to make a similar deal with the Bolsheviks to try to create another church called the Living Church, to replace the Russian Orthodox Church with, to make the Russian Church illegal. So they tried that years before, it didn't work. So the same people got together again, this Sergius now with the Bolsheviks, and orchestrated by this Tuchkov, and they wrote a declaration, which basically it's not a long declaration. It's available, and I'd be happy to send it to anybody who wants to read it. But the essential parts of it is that it started by saying, after 10 years of persecution by the Soviets, and countless executions and tortures of the church and destructions of the church, it started off by saying that we want to thank the Soviet authorities for always being so helpful to the church, and always looking out for our best interests, and always being protectors of the church. So it started with that, and then it went on to say that, and we want to say that we want to be Orthodox Christians, but at the same time we want to become in complete unity in goal and purpose with the Soviet authorities, whose goal was to destroy the church. And so we will work with them not out of fear but out of conscience, because we are the same. We have the same goals and the same joys and sorrows as they have, and we are no different from them. We are them, basically, in every way. And that is another point that's not acceptable to any Orthodox Christian. Absolutely, it's a total lie. And the third, and then he finishes his appeal by saying that, and all of you clergy and all of you people who are not ready to break your sympathies at this point, in other words, to overcome your loyalties to the Russian Orthodox Church and to Christ. Now, if you're not ready to break yourself at this time, stay at home and keep out of our way, he says. That's how he ended and people had to sign that. And the people that signed that were temporarily spared by the Soviet government. They thought, they could work with them. They were just going to obey orders and work for the Bolshevik government. And the ones who did not sign were executed and arrested immediately with no further trial and sent away as enemies of the people. He said, because the idea was that here is a church that is basically loyal to the government, and if you want a church, here it is. If you don't want to be part of it, then you are not really a part of the church. You are an enemy. You are counter-revolutionary. You need to be dealt with and executed. So the Sergius and the Bolsheviks gave them a very powerful weapon to persecute the church, and then they collaborated, the Sergianists, as they're called, and the people who followed Sergius into this, to point out the people in the Russian church that were not in agreement, where they are and how to find them. And they were basically instrumental in the liquidation of thousands of clergy people, and basically the reign of terror that ensued after that. So they basically ended up completely annihilating all the visible church. What was left of the church went either underground and became very hidden in the catacombs, or they were forced abroad. And this is the part of the church that we are now. And so we were not at that time in the 1920s. People were not yet able to make a good decision about what was going on in the Soviet Russia. But even after 1927, when Peter of Krutitsa and Kirill of Kazan were both executed on the same day together. Just before that, Kirill of Kazan wrote a letter saying that after 10 years of seeing the results of what Sergius did, this was 1937 already. So Metropolitan Sergius wrote this declaration on pain of death in 1927. And in 1937, the same Kirill of Kazan then said, well, after 10 years of seeing what this brought to, the results of this declaration, we can say that there is no grace in that church and the followers of Sergius, and no one should serve with them or be a part of them. So the Russian church basically denied them and kind of like said, do not associate with them, do not serve with them. They are not part of our church. So, and this was our attitude. So at that point, we reverted to from 1920 onwards to an ukaz, an order from the Patriarch Tikhon number 362 that said that if a church body finds itself unable to communicate with the central Russian Orthodox Church authority, in other words, the Patriarch, to form among themselves a government and govern themselves independently of the Russian situation. So this is the basis of our canonical existence, and that's how we were formed in Serbia. And then later on, it was translated to New York City, where our synod was then based, and our canonical basis is this ukaz of Patriarch Tikhon. So we always regarded the Moscow Patriarchate as a group that was not really, of the Russian Orthodox Church, but a group that went and joined the Soviet godless authority and worked with them and for them. And so we did not associate with them, we did not serve with them, but we were hoping all along that it was just because of pressure that they were doing this. They had we did not take it on ourselves to judge them. But we did not want to say that they did that, knowingly and willingly, which actually was true.
Yeah. So, because Sergius usurped the position of locum tenens, and you cut out for a minute. So Sergius usurped the title of locum tenens after all the canonical and legal successors of Saint Tikhon. Would that mean that the actual the legitimate and canonical Moscow Patriarchate administration died with the locum the Metropolitan Kirill and Metropolitan Peter, etc.?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, because not only did Metropolitan Sergius had no canonical and legal right to usurp authority, because his superiors were telling him not to do what he did, not to sign any kind of documents like that. They have no authority and they do not accept it. So what he did was canonically illegal, and it was an usurpation of power in the church. But morally, it was completely wrong, and spiritually, it was absolutely suicidal. Spiritually, it was devastating. To join the enemies of the church at time of persecution is not what the church has ever done. This is what the church has punished, has always. Somebody who actually caves in and joins the persecutors at the time of persecution and works against the church can be taken back into the church, but only after a lifetime of repentance. And but there is no repentance in them. They, to this day, they want to prove that they were right, and they saved the church. They even want to make a saint out of Sergius, as someone who saved the church. And they actually say that, well, at that time it was easy to die. Everybody was dying who was in the church. It was easy to die. But what was really hard, and what Sergius did, was much harder. He sacrificed his good name. He basically, not only his life, to sacrifice your life was easy, but he sacrificed his reputation, his name, in order to save the church, and that was much harder. So he's a great saint, and who saved the church, and that is complete heresy, and that is absolutely just because we haven't had a council that declared this to be a heresy yet, does not mean that it is not a heresy. It is a heresy that has yet to be officially pronounced to be such by a council of the whole church.
So that brings us to, so we understand now that the attitude of ROCOR was or the attitude of ROCOR towards the Moscow Patriarchate was they are not a legitimate canonical structure because all the canonical and legal successors of Saint Tikhon died, and the canonical church continued on in the Catacomb Church and in the Russian Church abroad, right?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah. So that leads us into your time at Jordanville. So, because this is what we're really talking about, we're really interested in is the road to 2007. What took the Russian Church abroad, from your experience since you lived there, into this union?
Well, it was an operation, I would say. It was planned and executed operation. It was not a like a grassroots movement. The Russian Orthodox Church abroad does not actually even agree to this union. If you're going to come right down to it. So when the Iron Curtain was up, we did not have much contact with people from the Soviet Union. But after the Iron Curtain fell, we started getting a huge influx of people from the former Soviet Union into abroad, and of course into the Holy Trinity Monastery in Jordanville. And among those were, of course, monks. There were families, there were intellectuals, there were professors and seminarians. And all of this influx of people who had been from the Soviet Union had a tremendous effect on the Russian Church abroad and their views and their attitudes here, because they started kind of like influencing the views here of many people. And under Bishop Loris, they started penetrating into positions of influence. Like he started making them professors in the seminary. And he made one of them the editor of the main Russian publication called Pravoslavnaya Rus, Orthodox Russia. It was a publication that was worldwide. The distribution that kept us all, connected and informed. And so he made the editor of that one of those people that came from there with very pro-Surgeonist views. And so basically this pro-Surgeonist Moscow, or what's now called Moscow Patriarchate, they should really just be called Surgeonists, because it's not a legitimate Moscow Patriarch. This is a very confusing term. If people would only stop calling them the Moscow Patriarchate and calling them what they really are, is a Surgeonist. It's a group that split away from the Russian Orthodox Church and joined the enemies of the church, and those enemies now made it into illegally, they made it into a patriarchate, which the church does not recognize to this day. Things will be a lot clearer. But anyway, these Surgeonists started influencing, started getting into positions of influence, and little by little, they started kind of like washing out or diluting the spirit of the Russian Orthodox Church abroad, especially and very much in the parishes, because the parish.
Oh, I lost him for a second. So, internet issues. Sorry about that.
Okay, we're back.
We're back. Yeah, we're back recording. I just paused it. So, yeah, you can go ahead and continue your story.
Yeah, we were talking about the attitude of the church abroad.
Yeah.
And it's not just the illegitimacy of it, but it's the betrayal. And how did things change in Jordanville? Well, gradually over time, as the old guard died off, and that's a whole different topic. We can talk about that too, because there were kind of like a rash of everybody. Within a couple of years, everybody from the old guard seemed to die off. That were very anti-union with the MP, that knew who they were and wouldn't even consider it. like Archimandrite Antony, Archimandrite Cyprian, Archimandrite Vladimir, Father Guri, Iona, we'll just go on, they all contracted cancer, and they all died within a couple of years. And then so this new manpower wave came in, and that was mostly replaced from the former Soviet Union. And they had very different attitude, very, very different spirit, very different style. Kind of like, if you'll pardon my saying so, but the Holy Trinity Monastery kind of seemed to have lost that, that holiness that it had before. Before, even as a kid, at 10 years old, I would come here. I would feel like as soon as we crossed into the property of the monastery, I feel like getting out and kissing the ground. And you sense the holiness in the air. It was like a spirit that was very strong, and that you did not dare but speak in whispers, anywhere, kind of like that. But now it became like a popular destination where people, hung out and did all sorts of things, and it became very worldly, more and more. And then as it became like that, then of course they became much more receptive to the Moscow Patriarchate. And Bishop Loras was not a man who could do who liked confrontation. He could not stand up to anybody. He would always kind of like agree with somebody and then kind of try to work around it and work behind them. So he was he would let all these people in, and kind of like just let them go on and do their kind of like preparation work. So this was, to make a long story short, it took maybe like 20 years for it to gradually move from the old Jordanville monastery of the very strict, very pure monastic, serious monastic spirit, to something very worldly, where the church was kind of like like another profession, or or kind of a lifestyle, if you like, in the world. So, under those conditions, it became much more penetrable. And it's the same with the parishes. The same things happened in the parishes. As the old people died off, the new people came in, and they had no idea what the church abroad was and what real Russian Orthodoxy was supposed to be. And they could not imagine what anybody's talking about if they're saying there's a difference between the church abroad and the Moscow Patriarchate. That's all they knew. In fact, they didn't even know the Moscow Patriarchate. They assumed that it was the Russian Orthodox Church. So, and they still do, and that's the problem. So it's very, very hard to explain this to people. They start looking away and losing interest, going glassy-eyed immediately as you try to tell them about this. They don't want to hear it, because they say this is not my business. It's it's church politics. They think it's church politics. No, it's the betrayal of Christ. This is that's not politics. This is you either work for one master, or you work for the other master. You can't work for both masters. There's only God and Satan. There's nothing in between.
That I have found that in my years, that the new ROCOR, like we're seeing new priests in ROCOR MP who are from, say, the OCA, and the concept of old ROCOR and the history that's contained in old ROCOR and the writings that are in old ROCOR are definitely very much buried, unfortunately. But so when did things, for you, when did you start seeing things change in ROCOR? Was it in the late 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and Bishop, that's when Metropolitan Vitaly became the Metropolitan. Bishop Vitaly became the Metropolitan after Saint Philaret died.
Yeah.
So he was actually elected to be Metropolitan, and he was old school. He was just, a lot like Metropolitan Philaret. and he was very eloquent and very and very traditional and very straight with regard to compromises. He did not accept any compromises, and he knew who the Moscow Patriarchate were and what they were up to. So they could get nowhere with him, and so he was very much becoming a persona non grata in the synod, because the synod was being penetrated also by younger people, like Metropolitan, like Bishop Hilarion, Bishop Gabriel, like Bishop Peter, who used to be Paul, people like that, and Bishop from San Francisco, Kirill, I believe. So these, this is kind of like completely different generation, completely different spirit of people. And they replaced people like Bishop Vitali. Bishop Vitali was like, they really could not wait for him to leave one way or another. They would even say that to his face.
Yeah.
So he was very much he very much started feel he did not like to be in New York, but he did it because it was his job, his obedience to be the metro. So he had to spend time there, and but he really felt at home in Montreal. That's what it was his diocese, his parish. The St. Nicholas Cathedral was a beautiful church. We served there at that time, the mirror streaming icon was, there all the time, and was very, very graceful time, and a very strong uplifting of our spirit in the church abroad. There were like miracles going on, and people, and we seemed to be growing. People were converting, and at the same time was this undercurrent of washing it out from the Moscow Patriarchate, infiltrating and diluting and watering down everything and making it more worldly at the same time. So that's why Bishop Vitali felt uncomfortable in New York, because he was surrounded by people who were of very different attitude and spirit to him, and they resented him, and he felt very uncomfortable there. But so he kind of like retreated to his, upstairs. He had this little apartment, and this he had instead of a male keleynik who would sell attendant, he somehow this woman ended up being there taking care of him, Roznyanskaya, Lyudmila, and she was very much an object of confusion and protest to a lot of people, because they said the bishop should not have a woman as his cell attendant and taking care of him. So that's why a lot of people felt that Bishop Vitali was not really responsible for what he was doing and for what he was signing, but everything was being filtered through her. And so a lot of people started resenting him even more for that. And so this just built up to the point where he finally felt that he had no support in the New York Synod, and he basically could not continue there. But it all was I think the event that really precipitated all of this was when Bishop Mark, who was always pro MP from his youth. I think he was probably set on that direction from his youth already, and he was made a bishop and a high-ranking bishop, so he had a lot of influence, and so he actually went to started going to the Soviet Union and meeting with the Patriarch Alexei on his own, without permission from the Synod and from the Metropolitan, and making his own kind of arrangements. And this, when Metropolitan Vitali found out about it, he was furious. I remember he even called me, and he was just like almost like yelling into the phone, saying, "What is going on over there?" And and he said, "I'm going to suspend him." And I was, we're trying to say, well, you don't have the right to suspend him on your own. You have to have the whole Board of Bishops agree to that. And of course they didn't. And he said, well, I don't care, I'm going to suspend him anyway. And he went ahead and he tried to suspend him. And of course, the Sabor did not support it, and so that fell through. So Mark was not suspended. And after that, basically, Bishop Vitaly felt that he was now powerless. The bishops were not going to support him. They were all against him, and mostly. And he had nothing to, like almost like Tsar Nicholas, was surrounded by traitors and cowardice. And he couldn't do nothing to fall back on. And so he basically stepped down from being metropolitan, and Bishop Loris took over that position temporarily until the next metropolitan would be elected. And when Metropolitan Vitaly was upstairs in his chambers, there was a car that came up, and some people came out. They said they wanted to talk to him in the evening, to Bishop Vitaly, and so they told Bishop Vitaly, and he came down in his nightrobe and his kind of like house shoes, slippers, and they kind of just put him into the car and floored it to the Canadian border. And so it's not that he was kidnapped. These were people that he trusted, and these were people that he knew, and they all decided that it's best for him to not stay here because he's surrounded by not well-wishers, and so he left. And so this was then called a kidnapping, and they said that he was taken against his will, but he wasn't. He wanted to. He had no place left. He didn't want to be in New York in the first place, and especially now, when his authority kind of collapsed there.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I did find I ended up finding a book on the entire collection of Bishop Gregory Grabe's reports to the synod, and one of those reports was exactly what you said. It was his report to Metropolitan Vitaly saying Mark of Germany is going behind your back, and he's in Russia doing whatever he was doing there at the time. So I do have that actual report in writing. So it's interesting that you did mention that. So that was really, so Metropolitan Laris was really the one. So after Metropolitan Vitaly's departure from the synod and the election of Metropolitan Laris, what changed after that? Why did ROCOR start going down that road after Metropolitan Laris?
Well, because Metropolitan Laris, I think, agreed to the union that it would be the best course, but he did that secretly. He still kept saying to everybody that there will not be a union. And in fact, as I wrote in the Beacon of Light Part 2, he actually announced once from the Ambon in the cathedral here in Jordanville that there was no way we could join with the Moscow Patriarchate. It's out of the question, and we should prepare for martyrdom. But then after that, everything that he actually did was, it looked like he was like facilitating the union, preparing for it. And it seemed to me that he kind of felt that we were going to be taken over one way or another. And it's almost, I got that impression by knowing him. I spent a lot of time with him and I talked with him. We were both on the staff of the seminary, and I was up in his office often talking to him. And he would come to my parish and serve with, in Utica. I was the rector in Utica at that time. And I got the impression that he felt that we will be taken over anyway by the Moscow Patriarchate, and it'll be, I think he even said something to that effect once to me, that it'll be a lot worse for us if we resist. There will be a lot more damage, kind of. So we may as well go peacefully and look like we enjoy it, because we're going to be taken over anyway. And I was just aghast at that. I could not believe that this is what he was. And so basically, I stopped serving then at that time in Jordanville, and I didn't even want him coming to my parish anymore. And I tried to organize this parish to resist the takeover, but there were too many traitors, and they immediately relayed everything to the management at Jordanville, and so they basically they basically sent me a letter saying that I'm relieved of my post at the parish and relieved of my post at the seminary, and basically to just leave. So that was the end of my time there, and so I had no place to serve. So
You mentioned in your article that Metropolitan Lares received a phone call from Russia. Can you tell us about that?
yeah, I was actually in his office inviting him to come to our parish for our parish, and the phone and somebody from the office there where he was upstairs in Jordanville from the other room, they said that that somebody's on the phone that you need to talk to. And I didn't hear what they said, but all of a sudden Bishop Loris started acting very agitated, and he basically kind of like, I just picked up the phone and started talking, and I kind of felt it was a private conversation. But I could overhear him saying yes, yes, of course, kind of like being very agreeable, and then I got wind that that was a call from the Kremlin, basically saying that the Putin's going to be in New York, and he wants to meet with our whole synod of bishops, at least with the synod, and so. They arranged that, and that's exactly what happened. I even have a link to photographs of that meeting in New York, where Bishop Kirill, Bishop, Loris, Bishop Mark, Bishop, I think Ilarion is there, and some lay people. And Putin is very, very earnestly explaining to them that this needs to be done. What they call reunification of the Russian Church needs to take place. So after that, it was kind of like basically the starter's gun went off, and after that, everything started like happening very quickly. They immediately called a meeting of all the clergy in Nyack, New York, not in Nyack, but just north of there, and they invited 3 of the top theologians from the Moscow Patriarchate to come and sit, on the stage in front there, and basically and give long lectures to us why we need to reunify, and that we until then we used to be called schismatics by the Moscow Patriarchate, and we'd be all suspended all the time by them. We were suspended, but all of a sudden now they said that no, we are the same church, and they said, well, it's a very strange situation where the church has 2 parts that don't concelebrate, but they're still equally valid, and they're still the same church. So we need to come to grips with that and find a new word for it. We haven't found a word for that yet, but we're going to find one, they said. And so they actually, prepared us for this union. And then shortly after that, they had the Sobor in San Francisco, where the whole church was supposed to be represented, and where the church actually said we would be very happy, which is not now, in other words, at the right time when certain of the issues that needed to be resolved will be resolved. And of course, those issues were, we need to discuss the problem of Surgeonism and its fruit. See, the fruits of Surgeonism, once you work for that master, not for Christ, but once you work for another master, then you start doing all the things that are beneficial for them. So they became ecumenists. They became basically that they don't care about all the heresies of the Roman Catholic Church. They want to unite with them. Well, we are basically sister churches. It's just a formality now. So all of this kind of heresies, they don't care about the church and the truth anymore. So these are, like Christ says, you judge a tree by its fruit, and these are the fruits. So why can't people just look at the fruits of the tree if they don't understand how rotten the tree is from the roots up? Just then look at the fruits of the tree. Even Christ says that to them. Just look at the fruits. A good tree cannot bring bad fruit. And if you think, that ecumenism, and not only with the Roman Catholics who are heretics, but with all the pagans, they're ready to celebrate, and with them, with anybody, because this is in the interest of the one, the world government. Is to unify the world under one leader eventually. So this is who they're working for, not for Christ. Christ says, I have come to peace. And, from now on, people will be divided. And it's the truth that will divide them. And so, you're either for Christ or you're against him. And so that's what people need to realize. And you can't have it both ways.
Yeah. So from your experience and from your having lived through that, who are the real architects of the union between ROCOR and now Moscow?
I think the architects are really in Moscow, and they are the ones who picked their people, their agents, and people to work for them here. And of course, one of them was Bishop Mark. There's no doubt about that. He was
What do we know about that from your experience?
From an early age, and then Bishop Hilarion, of course, was also from the. He was raised in a Moscow Patriarchate parish, and then he went to St. Peter to the Soviet Union. To go to seminary there. They sent him to Jordanville to us. So so he was always like a sleeper, I guess you could say. And when Bishop Loris agreed to the union, well, he did it kind of not, that wouldn't have been his first choice. He kind of did it because he thought that would be the best course under the circumstances, because he could not see himself opposing it and forming a resistance like Bishop Vitaly was always trying to do. So when he was gone, then immediately Hilarion stepped in, and he was just the perfect man for the job. So those were the architects, and of course there were a few clergy that got turned 180 degrees, like overnight practically. Like I mentioned, Father Alexander Lebedev in Los Angeles was very anti-union with the MP. He wrote a wonderful book exposing the MP and showing that it's impossible. And then immediately he switched and became one of the main advocates of the union. And the same with Father Peter Perekrestov, and even Victor Potapov was and his family. His Matushka Masha, they were very against it. And when he used to work for the Voice of America, and then he turned around and and then they had other people that they placed here already that were they looked like they were like Church Abroad people, but they were actually working to undermine the Church Abroad all the time.
Yeah. There is some articles. I'll share them real quick. Bring them up. Where'd they go? So, that was one of the things you mentioned, is that the union was basically an operation, right? And being a historian and an archivist and researching this stuff, now we're finding a lot of evidence of that in declassified government documents even. I can show, let's do, this is, yeah, so we'll do this one here. So this here is a declassified government document that shows that the current Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill, was repeatedly denied entry into France because he was for security reasons, and has indicated that the Soviet Ministry of Foreign Affairs that it will refuse all further application from Archbishop on this ground. So the French government, the French government had already known that the current Patriarch was working for the Soviet government as far back as the 60s when he was in Europe. So this was released in 2013. I just kind of found it the other day. So we do know that Patriarch Kirill was working for the Soviet government. In another, if you go to the Orthodox archive here, I just recently found these. These are articles from the Calgary Herald from 1999, and this was an article detailing that the Soviet government was in fact sending their people into parishes in the Western Hemisphere. So this is you can all see, if you're all interested in reading this, you can see this. And this is what's scary is these people were priests and hearing confessions and then reporting that back to the government, the Soviet government. So that is very scary.
Of the MP, they were required to report everything on confessions and then to point out the people to the government that needed to be arrested and liquidated. So they were very complicit in the persecution. But just one point I want to make here, if I may,
yes.
is that there is, when we talk about working for the church, working for the government, the church only works for God. It does not work for any government. And only insofar as the government is furthering the interests of people's salvation on earth, protection of their right to the faith, to their confession of their faith and their salvation, should the government should the church cooperates with the government. But it is really, the church is not of this world. It is not really for any government. It's really not of this world, literally. Its government is Christ, but it will support the government as far as the government is looking out for the interests, of the people, and especially with regard to their faith. But here's one thing I have to say, in addition to all that, is that, in fact, the church is and should be the conscience of the country. The government, without a church as a conscience, the government will tend to degenerate because of people's corruption and hypocrisy, as we see all over the world now. Human nature, fallen as it is, will inevitably corrupt any political system. Any political system, it doesn't matter. You cannot make a bulletproof system like the founding fathers of America tried to do, and we see what's happening when in front of our eyes, with that, because of fallen human nature and greed, corruption, deceit, hypocrisy take over. And so the church at least has to be incorruptible. If the church is corrupted, then there is no chance. Then the government will just literally go to hell. But if the church is staying true to Christ, then the church is the voice of truth and reason and justice in the country, that the courts can then orient themselves on and depend on the church to basically keep them on the straight and narrow. And then there it's possible to have at least have an orientation of truth and not be completely swept away by corruption. So if the church itself becomes corrupt and works for a corrupt government, then there is no chance, for that country it will collapse. And that the Soviet Union did collapse, and what I'm trying to say is that the path that they're on now is not a solid path, because they still have not recognized what happened 100 years ago, that they betrayed because of the sin. It's one thing to make a political mistake and establish a form of government that's not going to work. But like I say, no form of government is going to work if there is no church that will keep its loyalty to Christ and to truth and to fairness, above all else, not paying attention to death or persecution or to anything else, but being totally loyal to Christ, even to the cross, following him to the cross without any compromises. That's the only way. And if in the current situation in Russia, they seem to be doing well now because of their economy and their politics and all that. But as long as of the sin of the surgeonism in the church and the betrayal of Christ and the church and the betrayal of Christ anointed, the Tsar, who was actually ordained by the church to rule in God's name, as long as they want to sweep that under the rug and say, well, that was part of our history, let's forget about that, and let's just go on now. A sin does not get forgotten. Like mistakes can get forgotten and you can then go on if you make a mistake. But a sin is not a mistake. A sin remains. It has a spiritual reality that has to be dealt with. And the only way it can be dealt with is by true repentance, and then forgiveness through the grace of the church. The church has the grace to forgive the sin. Only God can forgive sins, but he's given that grace to the church. And that's the only way a sin can be lifted. And there's no future for Russia, is what I'm trying to say, as long as they don't face up to that and do not face the fact that the country has sinned and needs to address the sin and have it repented of and absolved. And only then has it a chance to actually build a future that is solid on a rock of Christ, not on the sand of politics.
Yeah. Going back to that union, so you were mentioning that the union wasn't supported by most clergy and laity at the lower levels, the parish levels. What happened? So I know there was a clergy laity conference, and there was one in New York and one in Nyack, if I'm correct, 2006.
That's right. And
what happened there?
Well, a lot of people talked, it's walk the walk, as they say. And most of the people who spoke out most loudly against the union and wrote articles like books and everything against it, when push came to shove, they just quietly went along because I think it was made very clear to them that if you're not going along, then good luck. Here's, it's like, there's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. And they all got the message. And I even have, a lot of my friends are priests that I grew up with. I know that they, even after the union, they still refused to join. And then when it was like explained to them that, well, you don't have any other profession or any other job. You can maybe get a job at McDonald's, but you won't be able to live in this house. You won't be able to have this car. You're on your own, kid, and good luck.
Yeah.
And when they have their family to take care of, and they weren't quite ready for this. Like the new martyrs, was a different category of people. They didn't care. It's a question of faith. Who do you trust more? Do you trust that God will take care of you, or do you trust that the MP will take care of you? And if they thought that, well, no, I can't afford because I don't have, I can't live in the world. I can't, have a job enough to support my family, so I have to stay. Maybe God will forgive me. No, that's not how it works. And so they had to break their conscience, like Sergius was demanding of them back in 1927. He says, if you're not ready to break your conscience, then stay at home and stay out of our way. So they kind of decided to do that. And, I hate to say it, but, it was a test of faith. And this is what we had to do. We had to put our faith in God, that walk out. If they kick you out on the street, walk out on the street, and then God will show you the way from that point on. And that's how it's always done. And that's how the church grows, on that kind of faith. And when it's put to the test, well, that's when we find out, So like Christ says, he has a way of pruning his vine all the time. And this was the dead wood from the parts that still are alive, and the parts that are alive are ready. As a Christian, we really do need to be ready to die any day for your faith and for Christ without any. If you're not ready, every day, and every minute of your life, if that's what God sends you. But there's very few people that are actually asked to give up their life, for God. Very few. They have a very special background, and they've always yearned to be. A lot of them, if you read the lives of the saints or the prologue, you see that from early on they wanted, they burned with this desire to die for Christ. But those are very special and very different people. But most of us, Christ says, when they persecute you in one city, run to the next, and just keep. Christ himself showed us an example when they. Instead of staying there and dying when he was an infant, he escaped to Egypt to escape persecution. And then whenever they tried to throw him off a cliff, he just walked out and he walked away from them. So it was not his time. So this is what we should do. When they're persecuting us and threatening us, then we should just walk away, and then God will show us the way. People need to understand that, and not be afraid.
Mm. So at these conferences, that was the lady and the clergy. They didn't go along originally, right? At both San Francisco and Nyack conferences.
Well, there were a lot of priests that did. I would say at least half of them were already ready to go along.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because
What was it?
Because
But it wasn't decided, right?
Communism has fallen in Russia. Now it's not Soviet Union anymore. It's time, and the Moscow Patriarchate needs us to show them, to fix them, basically.
Yeah.
That some were even saying things like, well, let's just join them for like 2 weeks, okay? Let's just go there for 2 weeks. If in 2 weeks there's no change, then we'll leave again. We can always leave. They were even saying absurd things like that. So they thought, well, they need us. We need to go there, support them, help them. Now that there's no communism there, we need to go and basically help them clean house and the church. But it doesn't work like that, because those people had no intention of cleaning house. In fact, they see as an acquisition, as an important market penetration. That's how they see us.
So I saw in your article you were saying that at those two clergy lady conferences, they actually decided not to join, right?
That's right. Join at the right time.
Oh, you cut off for a second. Say it again.
They as the actual wording of the documents, the resolutions of the Sabor in San Francisco says, the whole church decided that we will be very happy to join to restore the union of the Russian Orthodox Church at the right time. And then the bishops clarified it by saying, when certain obstacles to the union have been addressed.
So what were these obstacles? They were obviously it was Sergianism and ecumenism, correct?
Well, ecumenism is the result of Sergianism, and of course, not only ecumenism, but much else. It's the result of a church that is a worldly church that has bowed not to Christ but bowed to the godless authority and works for them, and is a worldly organization that's kind of like having a facade of a church. And but that is the result. So ecumenism is not the reason; it's the fruit of the betrayal of Christ.
I recently heard one priest who's still in the MP that's said that the Moscow Patriarchate renounced ecumenism and Sergianism as we knew it in ROCOR at the time, which is why we were able to unite with them. Is this true?
Well, they gave some lip service to that. As far as ecumenism is concerned, they said, "Oh no, we're not really ecumenists. We're just witnessing our faith in front of all these people." So that's a patent lie. They're not really ecumenists because they don't really believe in ecumenism either. They just believe in penetrating and influencing the world. For control and for espionage, for control, for influence, for power, penetration, all that kind of stuff. So they're not really religious. There's no religious interest there. So they're not really ecumenists. They don't really actually believe. I guess maybe they're right from that point of view. But as far as Sergianism, they said a really kind of like a very anemic statement. They said, well, we agree that if the church is being forced to do something that it should not be doing, it probably should not. It should not agree to that. So
was there any official?
That's not a repentance. That's
I was going to ask you, was there any official repentance Was
No,
there
no.
actual statement where we repent of this?
No, no, absolutely not. They don't even want to talk about it. No, like I said, they at one point they gave a blanket statement that said that, well, generally, if a church is being forced to do something that is contrary to its principles or something, it should not agree. That is not exactly a repentance. It's like somebody was just murdered somebody, in court. They'll say, well, I agree that people, should behave well and properly. They should not do bad things.
Yeah.
There are repentance. There's no repentance.
Yeah.
They absolutely not. No, people that have acquired power illegitimately and are used to the power are not going to say that, well, I guess, yeah, we were wrong. Here's the power back. We're going to give it up because it was not properly acquired. People, once they acquire power, they use that power to keep the power. They're not going to give it up.
Yeah. Yeah. To make a side point, what you said about the World Council of Churches, I have in that one document I was showing. It shows how the Soviet government has been using the World Council of Churches since they entered in '61. How they were using the World Council of Churches to launder money, conduct espionage, and as you said, gain and influence with political agendas. So we do have that in actual writing through various government documents. Very sad and interesting. The one big thing, so you're familiar, I think most people are familiar, is the deposition videos of those Metropolitan Lares and Archbishop Gabriel of Montreal.
Mhm.
And in that video, he said in 1990, was it 1993 that video was made, that the anathema is magically gone because otherwise we would fall under it. Can a group of bishops by signature, by fiat, just
No.
get rid of a conciliar decision?
No. And it is established by, well, now Patriarch Tikhon basically anathematized the Bolsheviks and all their collaborators, which, of course, obviously is the MP, would by their own self-definition are not only collaborators but identify themselves with the Soviet government. So that anathema was from the Patriarch, but a proper anathema is established by a council of the whole church.
Mm-hmm.
Although there can be a local council, but then the ecumenical council has to then ratify it. Then like the 7 great ecumenical councils, for example, those anathemas are for Arianism, for Nestorianism, for iconoclasm. All of these anathemas are de facto accepted by the whole church, universal church. But the anathema that we proclaimed to the to the Soviet government and their collaborators, that Patriarch Tikhon, we are upholding that because there has not been an ecumenical council to ratify it, but nonetheless we're upholding it, and also the anathema to ecumenism, which the Church abroad proclaimed, we're upholding. But Bishop Loris, when he started already started to move towards preparing for the union with the MP, he became very uncomfortable with ecumenism anathema, to the point where in my book, Orthodoxy and Spiritual Delusion, towards the end of it, I write about ecumenism. And I said that that was an anathema, that it was a false teaching, was a heresy. And when I had Bishop Loris review my book before asking, to get it published, he actually told me to take that part out about ecumenism. And I said, well, why? Don't we have an anathema? Didn't our Sabor, the whole church abroad, proclaim an anathema to ecumenism? And he said, well, these are his words. He said, well, that's just our little thing. That's just our little church. The rest of the world does not really, accept it. So it's not a real anathema. It's just our little thing that we do here, but it's of no importance. It should not be. It does not apply really outside of our little group here. So it's just our little thing, and you can leave that out because it's not really, part of the universal Orthodox mentality. So he was already basically on board. He was already trying to clean out or purge anything that might offend, world Orthodoxy, especially the MP, who are deep into ecumenism. They're head the World Council of Churches.
Yeah, they do have. They are paying. They are to be a member of the World Council of Churches. You have to pay an annual due, on top of adopting their ecclesiology and their inside their documents. So, but how did So in 1993, Archbishop Gabriel said that ROCOR, if they did not lift that anathema, that they would fall under it. So how does there was no ROCOR council that revoked that anathema from 1983, correct?
Possibly.
It was just a few bishops that signed, and it was gone, or
No, it was not gone. No, it was not gone. No, anathema like that cannot. It was established for the MP. It was established by all the collaborators with the Bolshevik, godless, atheistic regime that tried to destroy the churches and the faith in God. So that was an anathema to them. But the anathema that our church abroad proclaimed was to, of course, ecumenism, and of course they fall directly under that. And so no, it was not rescinded, and it was not lifted in any way. There was no sabor that would possibly have done that.
Yeah.
Even the MP would officially claim that they are not ecumenists, so they would not they don't think it applies to them because they claim they're not ecumenists.
So they cannot. The 1983 anathema, it was a conciliar decision from the Sobor of ROCOR in 1983. In 2000, then up until 2007, it was never lifted by another council, correct? No. How would Moscow not fall under that anathema since they're members of the World Council of Churches?
But but at that time they considered us to be a schismatic group and irrelevant.
Oh, you cut off for a second. Start over.
No, they always, at that time especially, they always claimed that we were a schismatic group under suspension. So whatever we did was completely irrelevant and non-binding. So it does not apply to them. So I don't know how they, ask them how they justify any of their behavior. They will spin it any way they need to, but it doesn't make it true, or it doesn't really matter how they explain it. It's just it's not relevant.
Yeah, the one I heard just recently, I heard one ROCOR MP priest, since there is no justification for it, for being in there, the excuse was, or the explanation rather, was the ecumenical patriarchate is there, so we have to be there. And my thought process was, if the ecumenical patriarchate goes into heresy, that means you have to go into heresy with him?
Mm-hmm. Well, as a matter of fact, that's exactly the case. The ecumenical patriarch is very much into heresy, and so they follow. But they are competing with the ecumenical patriarchate. It's all political chess moves. They want the world to accept the Moscow Patriarchate as the preeminent seat of Orthodoxy in the world, because they're church. the Byzantine Patriarchate is much smaller in number, and
Hmm.
it's always been under the Turks, under the Muslims. So they kind of are like hanging on by their fingernails to their kind of title, but the Moscow Patriarchate is trying to basically make them kind of lose their finger hold by their fingernails and take
Hmm.
over as the Orthodox seat, like the Orthodox Vatican, and sort of to that's why they're so close with the Pope. They're like kissing cousins with the Pope, basically.
Yeah, it seems like they're competing now. The ecumenical patriarchate is close with the Roman Catholic Papist, and now the Moscow Patriarchate is very cozy with the Monophysite Ethiopians and
Yeah.
Indians, and
Well, the MP is also very cozy with the Pope. Also, I think they're almost like want to outdo each other. Like anyway, I would rather not speculate on that. On like uh, like Bishop Vitali once said very correctly. He says knowledge of all the corridors of hell isn't going to save you. It's not going to help you. You know.
the one of the last questions I had that people are wondering. So when you read through old ROCOR books, or Pravoslavny Rus, when you read through that, when you read through the letters of Metropolitan Vitali, Metropolitan Saint Philaret, you see a constant reference to the Catacomb Church. We're seeing a constant reference to the Catacomb Church in all the old ROCOR writings.
Yeah.
Why in the late 2000s did ROCOR stop referring to
Well.
the Catacomb Church?
Well, very clearly because in the 2000s already they started trying to be of one spirit with the Moscow Patriarchate. And the Moscow Patriarchate would never admit that there was a catacomb church. What Patriarch Kirill refers to it, and to us and to anybody else who's not with them, he calls it the church sewage. So that's what he calls us, and he says, it's the sewage system of the church where everything gets flushed out. So of course they're not going to take it seriously and talk about it. And the church abroad, when it started kind of like trying to adjust itself to the Moscow Patriarchate, to put it politely, um, it stopped, using that terminology like church abroad. As far as they're concerned, they don't exist, and if they do, there are some weirdos that shouldn't be paid any attention to.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have seen even as there's a Father Daniel Sisoyev that everybody's seems to be drawing to for some reason. There's a document that he wrote back in before he died that referenced Saint Peter of or Saint Joseph of Petrograd as a schismatic, and other catacomb saints as schismatics and heretics, and they in fact removed, I think it was 72 new martyrs from the calendar back in 2012.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the whole idea of the MP now glorifying the new martyrs is like the height of hypocrisy and irony, because they're the ones who actually helped to make the martyrs in the first place. And then they said, "Oh no, there's a lot of people from the Sergionist group that were also killed and martyred." Well, that doesn't make them really necessarily martyrs, or maybe, but you know he was a part of the Soviet government, very much a part of it. It was actually called the Department Number 5 of the KGB. And they had files on everybody. So if they start cleaning house, they really didn't want any religion anyway. So they kind of used these people for as long as they were useful, and then when they weren't useful anymore, like any criminal organization that just gets rid of them. So that doesn't make them martyrs, because they betrayed Christ already by joining, an organization like that already. So, they cannot boast and say that, oh no, we have most of the new martyrs. They would say most of the new martyrs were from the Surgeonist group, they say even, but that's all false. That's all like rewriting history. It's all false, pulling wool over people's eyes, false propaganda.
What do you think about as far as reading material for the Russian New Martyrs by Andreev? Would you recommend people read that?
It's a wonderful book, yeah. And Father Seraphim Rose also, very good. There's actual like letters of them and stories and factual, evidence of exactly what was going on there. But but I don't want anybody to get the impression that I'm saying that we're condemning everybody in the Moscow Patriarchate right now.
Yeah, we're just talking about the hierarchy, right?
The majority of the people don't know.
Yeah.
Said to the Pharisees, if you did not know, the sin would not be on you. But since you do know, the sin remains on you.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good point that needs to be, because I know most people are.
We are not condemning the people. And there's a lot of good priests that are trying to do their best. They just don't know. They don't have any options. They don't know of any options. So they're trying to do their best, and some of them get persecuted and sent away, if they're a step out of line. And a lot of the faithful, they've never heard of the Moscow Patriarchate as being, a creation of the Soviet state and in opposition to the Russian Orthodox Church. They don't know that it's the false church. So we cannot possibly blame them. We are on their side. They are the victims, not the perpetrators of this. They are the victims, and our heart bleeds for them, and we want to reach out to them somehow. Any way we can, and let them know that the church still exists, and that the church can be, and God willing, will be restored in Russia someday. The real church, not this fake church that actually persecutes the real church. But so it's the people that are in control that ride, in these bulletproof limousines with armed guards. These are the bishops that are afraid of the people. Our bishops kind of just walked around everywhere, and or rode on carriages, and visited everything. But these, it's completely different story. These are the ones that are basically holding onto their power, like the Pharisees. They are the ones who are persecuting, Christ and the church in Russia, and dressing themselves up as, as bishops, and they give wonderful sermons. It's amazing how they've learned, what to say, just like the Pharisees. Like Christ said, do as they say, but what they're saying is right. Do as they say, but don't do as they do. You know? So this is the same thing again.
Yeah, that's that was almost all the questions I have. I do want to look up your book real quick and give that a shout so we could read that.
Faith and Delusion, or Faith and Spiritual Delusion. It's both in Russian and in English. And if you put my name with Father Nikita, then it'll come up. It's every bookstore, almost in England, here in Australia, everywhere, Canada.
Here's the book.
Yeah, that's it.
So there's Father Nikita's book. If you're interested in some of the stuff that we were talking about, we'll find it in there. I also published a book, republished one of the one of the books that was back, and it was open. It was published in the 60s or the 70s, and it was public domain. And it is, if you want to look at read about what Father Nikita is talking about, how the Moscow Patriarchate administration actually died, and Patriarch St. Tikhon was the last legitimate patriarch, and all these other ones are government appointees in essence. You can check out this book by Bishop Gregory Grigoriev. He goes into great detail on what stuff and the things that Father Nikita was talking about. What should the last question I have is for those who are in ROCOR MP and others that are in other jurisdictions that are want to know more about this history. Where should they go to look?
Well, about the history, or
yeah, about the all the stuff we're talking about. That's the union and because most people are think it was a reunification is what they say.
Well, one of the sources, I did a lot of research on this when I was teaching apologetics. People sent me material from all over the world, and I compiled something that was called ROCA, R-O-C-A, Russian Orthodox Church Abroad, the Beacon of Light. And I wrote that article, and that basically traces out the historical development of this conflict and this organization called the Moscow Patriarchate. But I drew a lot of things from a lot of other books, and one of them is Father Alexander Lebedev's. I would actually recommend his book. It's actually very good. It's called Plod Lukavi, the evil fruit. He actually calls it, by Father Alexander Lebedev of Los Angeles. He may not appreciate me promoting this book now because it is exactly the opposite of what he is preaching now, and but it's actually a documentary, and that's very that traces out a lot of things.
I think I might have to track that book down. It's probably only in Russian, though, I'd imagine, right?
Yes, I don't know if it was translated because this was this issue did not really concern too many converts, because strangely enough, many converts actually went along with this union. Like I couldn't understand how that how they could because this seemed to be writing this union with the MP on a nostalgic wave of nationalism, Russian nationalism that they were trying to stoke up. But it's exactly the opposite. It's actually killing Russian nationalism by cementing it into anti-church Soviet kind of institution here. So, but a lot of these converts actually, like Father George, who's Bishop George now. We were like close friends with him, and I couldn't understand, and many of the others are now bishops, are Americans, and I can't understand how they got swept up in this. But anyway, that's their business, and God will.
Yeah, well, Father, it was good. It was good to talk to you. It was very good to record your memories of what you remember and the history of kind of how this union came about. And I appreciate you taking the time to tell us.
Thank you for the opportunity, and it's not us; it's God's truth and God's glory that we should all be, interested in and working and striving towards. It's let God's glory shine through all this darkness, and God's truth. Like he says in his gospel, no secret will remain a secret, but everything that is done in the shadows and in the background will become manifest
Come to light.
and come to light. So all of this will, the truth will come to light. Just you got to have patience and trust in God, and then He will basically He's in charge, and He will, and we need to pray for Him to allow us to not allow us to fall into temptation and to be swept away from His fold. That's what we should be mostly worried about. Not saving the world, but asking God to protect us from being, falling into temptation and being lost.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'll end the recording and I'll talk to you here in a second. But thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Well, God bless you.
Thank you, Father.